There are things the average Japanese person does every single day without a second thought that most Westerners would find genuinely, almost physically impossible to pull off. Not because Westerners are incapable, but because these habits require something the modern Western world has slowly trained out of us. A kind of patience, discipline, and quiet self-restraint that Japan has kept alive and the rest of us have mostly lost. To a Japanese person, these things are simply normal, effortless, invisible. To a Westerner, even attempting them reveals just how far our two ways of living have drifted apart. And here's the fascinating part. Once you see what these things are, you start to realize they're not really about Japan at all. They're a mirror. Each one shows you something the West has given up, usually without noticing, usually in exchange for convenience, speed, or the freedom to simply do whatever we feel like in the moment. Japan kept these habits. We traded them away, and looking at what they held on to tells you a great deal about what we quietly lost. Let me say one thing and then I won't bring it up again. I put the heart of everything on this channel into a small book, Wabi Sabi, Finding Peace in an Imperfect Life. It's linked below. If it speaks to you, now let's continue. Today I'm going to walk you through 8 of these things, habits so ordinary in Japan that nobody there thinks about them, and so difficult for Westerners that most of us couldn't manage them for a week. Some will surprise you. A couple might make you a little uncomfortable because you'll recognize exactly why you couldn't do them. And the 8th one is the hardest of all, the one that underlies every other habit on this list, and the one the West has lost most completely. Stay with me, because by the end you'll understand the single thread connecting all 8 and why Japan can do what the rest of us find impossible. Let's begin. Ride a packed commuter train in Tokyo and you'll experience something that genuinely disorients most Western visitors: near total silence. A train car with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people, and it's quiet. No loud phone calls, no music leaking from headphones, no groups talking at full volume. People keep their voices low or silent, phones on silent mode, out of consideration for everyone sharing the space. To most Westerners, this is almost impossible to imagine, let alone do. In the West, public space is treated as an extension of personal space, a place where you're free to talk loudly, take calls, laugh, play videos out loud, and generally behave as though the people around you aren't there. Asking a Westerner to sit in complete, considerate silence on a crowded train, surrounded by strangers, for the whole journey is asking them to override an instinct they've had their entire life. Here's what makes it possible in Japan: a deep cultural value called wa, social harmony, and a genuine horror of causing meiaku, of being a nuisance to others. The silence isn't enforced by rules or fear. It flows from a shared internalized sense that the peace of a public space belongs to everyone in it, and that protecting that peace matters more than your freedom to fill it with your own noise. Westerners find it impossible not because they can't be quiet, but because they've never been taught that the shared quiet is theirs to protect. Why it's impossible for Westerners: we were raised to treat public space as ours to fill. Japan was raised to treat it as everyone's to protect. In Okinawa, there's a phrase spoken quietly before meals for generations: hara hachibu, eat until you are 80% full, and then stop. Not stuffed, not until the plate is clean, just 80%, and then you put the chopsticks down. Ask a Westerner to do this and watch how hard it actually is. We've been trained our entire lives to do the opposite, to clean the plate, to eat until we're completely full and often well past it, to treat the feeling of being stuffed as the natural end of a meal. The idea of stopping while you could still comfortably eat more, deliberately leaving that last 20%, feels almost unnatural. It requires overriding both a lifetime of habit and the immediate physical pull to keep eating something that tastes good. What makes it possible in Japan is a combination of cultural training and mindful eating, eating slowly, paying attention, and treating the pause as normal rather than as deprivation. The Okinawans didn't arrive at this through willpower. They arrived at it through a culture that made stopping before full the ordinary, expected thing. For a Westerner, doing it means fighting the entire eating environment we grew up in. The huge portions, the fast eating, the clean your plate conditioning. It's not that we can't. It's that everything about how we were taught to eat pulls the other way. Why it's impossible for Westerners: we were taught to eat until full. Japan learned to stop before it. Walk into a traditional Japanese home, and a Westerner's first instinct is often quiet discomfort. Where is everything? The rooms are spare, surfaces are clear. There's empty space, deliberate, generous, unfilled empty space, where a Western home would have furniture, decoration, and things. Living this way is genuinely difficult for most Westerners, and not for practical reasons. It's psychological. We have been trained to fill space. An empty wall feels like a problem to solve. An empty corner is an opportunity for a plant or a shelf. An empty surface asks to have something placed on it. The idea of leaving space empty on purpose and living with very few possessions by choice runs against a deep Western instinct to accumulate, to display, and to treat a full home as a rich and successful one. In Japan, this is made possible by a completely different relationship with emptiness, captured in the concept of ma, the idea that empty space is not a lack but a presence, something valuable in itself. Combined with the instinct against waste and accumulation, this produces homes that feel calm precisely because of what isn't in them. A Westerner finds it impossible not because they can't remove things, but because removing things triggers a genuine anxiety, the feeling that empty space is failure, that a bare room means something is missing. Japan feels the opposite, that the empty space is the point. Why it's impossible for Westerners? We see empty space as something to fill. Japan sees it as something to protect. Here's one that genuinely stuns Westerners when they witness it. In Japan, people clean up after themselves in public as a matter of course, and there's often no one making them. Sports fans famously stay after games to clean their section of the stadium. School children clean their own classrooms. People carry their trash home with them because public bins are scarce. And it happens without enforcement, without cameras, without anyone checking. For most Westerners, this is almost incomprehensible. We've largely internalized the idea that public cleanliness is someone else's job, that there are people paid to handle it, so it's not our responsibility. Leaving your tray at the fast food restaurant, dropping litter at a festival, leaving a mess behind because that's what the cleaning crew is for. These feel normal. The idea of a whole stadium of adults voluntarily cleaning up or carrying your own garbage around for hours until you get home seems almost unbelievable. What makes it possible in Japan is a deeply ingrained sense of personal responsibility for shared space, taught from childhood, reinforced by the whole culture, and rooted in that same value of not being a burden to others. Cleaning up after yourself isn't a chore imposed from outside. It's an expression of respect for the people who share the space and will come after you. Westerners find it impossible not because they're incapable of picking up their own trash, but because they were never raised to see the shared space as their responsibility in the first place. Why it's impossible for Westerners, we learned public cleanliness is someone else's job. Japan learned it's everyone's. Watch how Japanese people queue and wait, and you'll see something that tests the Western temperament to its limit. Orderly lines, patient waiting, no pushing, no cutting, no visible frustration. Even in crowds, even in delays, even when there'd be every excuse to grumble, people wait their turn, calmly, in order, as a matter of course. For many Westerners, this level of patient, uncomplaining order is genuinely hard. We live in a culture of immediacy, of getting what we want quickly, of visible impatience when we're made to wait. The sighing in a slow line, the frustration at a delay, the instinct to find the faster route or express our annoyance. These are so normal, we barely notice them. Sustained, calm, orderly patience, with no complaint even when things go wrong, requires a self-restraint that the fast, convenience-driven West has largely stopped cultivating. What makes it possible in Japan is gammon, the cultural capacity to endure difficulty with patience and quiet dignity, without letting frustration spill out onto everyone around you. Combined with the deep respect for order and for not imposing your feelings on others, it produces a way of waiting that looks, to Western eyes, almost superhuman. It's not that Japanese people never feel impatient. It's that the culture taught them to hold it with dignity rather than broadcast it, a skill the West, in its impatience, mostly abandoned. Why? It's impossible for Westerners. We were trained to expect immediacy. Japan was trained to endure the wait with dignity. This sounds trivial until you understand what it actually requires. In Japan, shoes come off at the entrance of every home, always without exception, no matter how rushed, no matter the circumstance. And it's not just a habit, it's part of an entire system of keeping the outside world separate from the clean inner sanctuary of the home. Westerners find the full version of this surprisingly hard to maintain. Yes, plenty of Western households take shoes off, but the Japanese version is absolute and effortless in a way that reveals how inconsistent the Western habit is. We track outside dirt across our floors constantly. We walk in with shoes, just for a second. We treat the boundary between outside and inside as fuzzy and negotiable. The Japanese version, the unbroken, never questioned, structurally supported separation of outside and inside, requires a consistency and a respect for the home as sanctuary that most Westerners can't quite sustain. What makes it possible is that the entire home is built and organized around it. The Genkan entryway, the indoor slippers, the deeply held cultural line between the dirty outer world and the clean interior. It's not willpower, it's a whole system that makes the right thing automatic. Westerners find it hard not because taking off shoes is difficult, but because we never built our homes or our instincts around treating that boundary as sacred. Why it's impossible for Westerners. We treat the line between outside and inside as negotiable. Japan built its whole home around keeping it absolute. Watch a Japanese craftsman, a shopkeeper wrapping a purchase, or someone simply preparing a meal, and you'll often notice a quality that's become rare in the West: total, present attention to an ordinary task. The wrapping done with genuine care. The small job performed as though it matters. The full presence brought to something mundane. For most Westerners, this is genuinely difficult because we've been trained toward the opposite: speed, multitasking, and treating ordinary tasks as obstacles to rush through on the way to something more important. We eat while scrolling, work while distracted, do the dishes while mentally somewhere else entirely. The idea of bringing calm, complete attention to a small, boring task, of being fully present with the washing up or the wrapping or the tidying, feels almost like a waste of time. Why be present with the mundane when you could be getting it over with? What makes it possible in Japan is a cultural current running back to Zen. The idea that how you do the small, ordinary thing is not separate from how you live, and that full attention to even a humble task is a form of care, and even a kind of practice. This is why ordinary Japanese work often carries a quality of craftsmanship and mindfulness that startles visitors. Westerners find it impossible not because they can't focus, but because we've been taught that the ordinary task is something to escape, rather than something to inhabit. Why it's impossible for Westerners: we rush through the mundane to get to the important. Japan learned the mundane is the important. Here it is, the eighth thing, the hardest of all, and the one that underlies every other habit on this list. In Japan, there's a deep default instinct to consider the group, the collective, the people around you, the harmony of the whole, before your own individual wants. It shapes everything: how people behave in public, how they work, how they hold their own desires in check for the good of everyone. Fitting in gracefully, reading the situation, subordinating the self to the group's harmony, these are among the deepest values in the culture. And this is where the West finds itself almost completely unable to follow, because Western culture is built on the exact opposite foundation. We prize the individual above all: individual freedom, individual expression, standing out, self-fulfillment, be yourself, look out for number one. The entire architecture of Western identity is individualistic. Asking a Westerner to consistently place the group's harmony above their own wants isn't asking them to change a habit. It's asking them to invert the value system they were raised inside. But notice, this single difference explains every other thing on this list: the silence on the train, the cleaning up after yourself, the patient waiting, the consideration in public. All of it flows from putting the group before the self. Japan can do the things Westerners find impossible because Japan starts from the collective and the West starts from the individual. Neither is simply right or wrong. They're two different answers to a deep question about how humans should live together. But it means that the habits built on group-mindedness will always feel nearly impossible to a culture built on the self. This is the root. Everything else grows from it. And it's worth sitting with how deep this goes, because it isn't a preference. It's absorbed from birth. A Japanese child grows up inside a world that constantly, gently reinforces the group, cleaning the classroom together, serving lunch to one another, being taught that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, that fitting in gracefully is a virtue and imposing yourself is a failure. A Western child grows up inside the opposite world, encouraged to stand out, to express themselves, to be special, to chase their own dreams, to put themselves first. By adulthood, these aren't opinions either person holds. They're the water each has always swum in, which is exactly why a Westerner can understand the group-first instinct intellectually and still find it nearly impossible to live, and why the Japanese habits that flow from it feel less like choices and more like breathing. Why it's impossible for Westerners. We were built around the individual. Japan was built around the group, and that changes everything. So let's step back and name the thread running through all of it. Silence in public, stopping at 80%, the near-empty home, cleaning up after yourself, patient, orderly waiting, the absolute shoes-off boundary, full attention to ordinary tasks, and the group before the self. Notice what connects every one. Each requires self-restraint in service of something beyond your own immediate wants, the comfort of others, the peace of a shared space, the discipline of enough, the harmony of the group. That's the real difference, and it's the mirror I mentioned at the start. The West, over the last century, has optimized relentlessly for the individual, for freedom, convenience, immediacy, and self-expression. We gained enormous things in that trade, but we also quietly gave up much of the patience, restraint, and consideration for others that these Japanese habits require. Japan kept them, and so the things that are effortless there feel impossible here, not because we lack the ability, but because we traded away the cultural muscles that make them automatic. Here's the genuinely useful part, though. These aren't genetic. They're not uniquely Japanese in some way you could never access. They're muscles. And muscles can be rebuilt, one small choice at a time. You can lower your voice on the train tomorrow. You can stop at 80% at your next meal. You can carry your own trash. Wait with a little more patience. Bring full attention to one ordinary task. Leave one space empty on purpose. Each one is a small act of the same restraint, and each one, practiced, quietly rebuilds something the modern world trained out of you. You don't have to become Japanese, but you might borrow what they never gave up and discover that the things that once felt impossible were only ever unpracticed. Now I want to hear from you. Out of these 8, which one do you think you'd find the hardest? And which one are you actually going to try? Tell me the number, 1 through 8, down in the comments. And if this made you see something about your own life a little differently, share it with one person who you think could use a little more calm, patience, or peace. I'll see you in the next one.